everyone, welcome to page 3 of my little art journal book. You will see that it actually isn't page 3 in real life, it is page 2 because I've already done 1 and 2 and I've got a gap in between those 2 pages. So I will be dotting about this album throughout this series of videos, so they won't necessarily appear in the same order in the book as I've numbered them for the sake of these videos. So I've got these 2 pages here in between the first 2 pages I created, and I want to create a magical page, and I love the character of Tinkerbell and I'm going to use her to decorate my page and allow me to do a little bit of journaling about my family's love of visiting Disney World. And I'm going to be using this little tutorial in a book that I bought while I was there to decorate one of these pages. So one little tip that I discovered, keep the top of your jar of gesso clear because it is very sticky, and I had a bit of trouble getting back into this pot. So just be aware that you need to keep the lid of your gesso clean, otherwise you might have the same difficulties. So again, I'm creating my spread. I've got to be careful of not getting any of the product on the 2 pages I've already created, and I'm going to be using a scrap of card in order to help me do that, but I will keep checking as I work because it's easy to wipe things off while they're still wet if a little bit of product seeps onto the next page. So I'm going to just use a couple of layers of gesso just to give myself the starting point to create these 2 pages, and I'm using the baby white mainly just to give me a smooth finish. I don't want any lines from the brush in the gesso. So grab a cup of coffee and put your feet up and relax while I take you through the steps that I used to make this page. A little bit of music, which is Blue Danube by Strauss, and I'll pop in from time to time to give you some hints and tips about how I created this page. So first of all, I had to decide whether to leave the stitching as it is and work with it, or to cover it up. And I decided once I put this piece of tissue tape down at the centre of my book, just to protect the centre spine of the book, to stop the paint leaking through the middle of the pages, that I quite liked the look of the music tissue tape, and I'm going to use it as a frame around these pages. So I did use it to actually cover up the stitching as well. And I'm just using a thin coat of gesso just to blend that tissue tape a little bit into the page. So I spotted a couple of magical words that I wanted to keep on my page, so I'm just using a clear embossing paste just over the top of the letters, just to protect them a little bit, so that when I paint over the page I'll be able to find them and just wipe the paint away to keep these words visible on my book page. So this is just something I'm going to be doing on any of the pages that I create, just to pay a little bit of a homage to the fact that this was originally a book, and I just wanted to keep some of the words that were printed on these pages. So it's time to try my hand at sketching my little Tinkerbell character into the corner of my page. I'm watching myself draw this Tinkerbell, it's quite nice to watch yourself do it and fast forward. I just remember all the times as a child that I've spent drawing and tracing. Started with colouring in, and then I decided to trace over perhaps images that I wanted, and traced them, and then I thought, oh, you know what, I can just trace the outline and then I can add the details myself. And that's gradually how I built up to the things that I can do today. Now, I don't say by any stretch of the imagination that I'm the world's greatest drawer, but I've reached a level of competency, and it's all been based on just trying, just getting out your pencil, getting out a piece of tracing paper and just having a go. And these books are ideal for that because they break these images down into simple shapes, and you can see how they were put together. It just gives you a bit more of a chance of being able to sketch these gorgeous little figures for yourself. And I just really hope that this video encourages you to give it a go. If you don't think that you can, please just try, and I'm sure that with a little bit of patience and a little bit of practice, you'll be able to draw things that you're happy with. And now it's time to add some colour to my page. I'm working with acrylic paints, and I'm just going to try and create a sky in the rest of the area around Tinkerbell. So I've got this lovely sky blue colour, and I'm going to be adding some clouds as I go along. So I'm starting out with a base coat of colour, and I'm just removing some of that colour from the tissue tape so that I create a kind of scratchy frame. So I'm literally just taking a piece of kitchen roll, and in the end probably just my fingernail, just to remove some of the paint in a sort of haphazard way around that tissue tape. And of course not forgetting to keep revealing my little words that I've decided to leave on the page. I started out stippling my clouds onto the blue background, but I decided I wanted a much more swirly effect to try and capture the movement and shadows in clouds. So I'm using probably about a ½ inch brush, and I'm just using a series of curved brush strokes in order to create my little clouds. I'm only using 4 colours in total. I've got this lovely sky blue, I've got white, I have a darker shade of blue which you can see on my palette, and I'm going to add a little bit of pink into the mix. this down a little bit so you can get an idea of what I'm actually doing to create these clouds. I'm just adding little pieces of light and dark paint and blending them with a series of almost like a C stroke, just slightly at an angle, just imagining the shape of a cloud as I do it, and then just using the brush to blend the edges of those colours that I add to the page. So I'm using a little bit of white, a little bit of pink, and then blending it back into that blue, just to give an indication. I'm not trying to draw the world's most perfect cloud, but I just want it to look like this sky has just got some fluffy clouds tinged with a little bit of pink. It's time to use my paints to colour in my Tinkerbell, and I just thought I would let you know that I am a little bit careful when I do this, because I've spent all that time kind of sketching my Tinkerbell, trying to get her as near to perfect as I can, but the last thing that I want to do now is cover up some of those important lines with my paint, so that I end up putting perhaps one eyebrow higher than the other, or put her eye in a peculiar position. So I'm a little bit careful as I colour her in, just to make sure that I've got enough of my lines showing that I can come back in and create all of those elements that I've been careful to draw. So you'll see me throughout this video just maintaining that scratchy frame. So if I paint over any area of the frame, I'm coming back in, as I said before, with my fingernails now, just to remove little scratches of paint from that tissue tape border. So whenever I do any work like this, my process is always the same. Sketch it out first, and then I come in with the paint, and I block the main colours in first, then I add the shading, and then I come back in and do all the line work. And you'll see that process as I fast forward through my creation of this little Tinkerbell in the corner of my page. So just adding a little bit of shading around the actual edge of the Tinkerbell drawing, because I just want to make her stand out a little bit more from that cloudy background. So I'm adding a darker shade of blue right around the outline and then blending it back into that cloudy sky. Next thing that I'm going to be doing is creating a series of tags that I can use to add photographs and journaling about the lovely holidays that we've enjoyed as a family in Disney World. So I'm going to make my tags blend into that background, and I'm going to use the strips as a means of keeping those tags on the page. And I'm only hoping that this works at the moment. I'm not too sure, but we'll see how I get on. So because I want these tags almost to disappear into that sky background, I'm going to paint them to match the area of the sky that they're in, or to the best of my ability I'm going to do that. So using that same sky technique, I'm starting out with a coat of blue and then coming back and blending some clouds over the front of the tag. I'm not going to show you all of that process again of doing all that cloud work, but I'm just showing you that I'm working on a piece of acetate, and using that acetate I can work out whether these tags are going to blend seamlessly into that background. And you can see here that I've just managed, using that acetate, to make my tags blend back into that sky background. And then it's time to round all the corners of my tags and paint the other side of the tags with the blue paint. I'm not going to bother making them cloudy, I'm just going to paint them blue. These are the thin strips, they're about 1/4 of an inch wide, that I'm going to be using to hold my tags in place. They're going to create just a little space that I can tuck the tags behind. I'm covering them completely on both sides with the tissue tape, and then I'm going to be using the same gesso just to knock the pattern back a little bit. And I'm also using the gesso only on one side because the tissue tape is a little bit shiny, and I just thought it would make the tag slip in and out easier if I left the tissue tape plain on the underneath, and you're not going to be able to see it anyway. So I'm using a dark blue ink just to emphasize the outside edges of my tags and also the outside edges of my book pages. Remember, if you're using a distress ink, and I've used a Stormy Sky to ink my edges, you need to make sure that they're heat set so that you don't get any transference of the ink when the book page is closed, because they've got quite a long drying time so that you can blend them, but you need to make sure they're dry in this instance before you close your page. So you can see that I'm adding a little bit of glue in between each of my tags and then positioning that holding strip, a bit like a luggage strip, over the top of my tags. And then once I'm happy the glue is in place and I can fit my tags underneath, I'm just applying a little bit of pressure to make sure that glue sticks this holding strip to the page. to make my tags look like tags, I'm using a 1/2 inch circle punch. I'm adding some tissue tape to a scrap of paper, and then I'm creating some reinforcers. So a couple of holes first, and then centre it in the middle of your 1/2 inch circle punch. And I'm going to do that 6 times to create little reinforcers for the tops of my tags. And then of course all tags need tails, and I'm creating those with a few pretty fibres that match the colours that I've used on my page. So I've got a few blue strands, a couple of pink ones, and a little tiny bit of a glittery thread running through. And I thought I would just tie them on to start with, and then I decided to loop them through and attach them to the tag that way. So now it's time to outline that Tinkerbell image, and I'm doing that with a blue fine marker. And the reason I'm using blue is because I thought black might be a little bit harsh, and I intend to do some stamping on my tags as well, and I will do that with a navy blue archival ink. As I'm doing my outlining, I'm very aware that the eyes are the trickiest part to get right in this drawing. If you get it wrong, you might find that Tinkerbell looks like she's either going cross-eyed or she's looking outwards in the opposite direction. And I was having a little bit of trouble with the smallest eye on the left, and I think part of that was because the eyebrow was too low, and that I'd kind of filled in the iris of the eye too much. So you'll see that I decide in a moment to paint over that, and that's the beauty of using paints and things. You can use the acrylic paint to paint over your line work just to rejig the shape slightly and make sure you've got everything in the right place. So I thought I'd leave this in so to let you see that you can quite easily correct mistakes. Sometimes it's worth coming back and looking at your drawing after a little while if you can't quite work out what's going on, and you'll find that your eye is telling you the truth. It's something isn't quite right, and wherever your eye is drawn, that's the area I'd look at and see if you can work out what is happening. Like I said, I'm just going to raise her eyebrows slightly without the aid of surgery, and even more gruesomely, I'm going to change where her eyeball is positioned. I'm using paint to block out the artwork, and don't forget to make sure it's nice and dry before you come back in with your pen to do the line work. So don't be afraid if you make a mistake. Now I think I have Tinkerbell with her eyes that are cooperating and her eyebrows in the right position. And I'm going to do some stamping of some Disney phrases onto the backs of my tags, making sure that the little words are going to sit in between the two tissue tape holders that I've got on my page. then I've got a stamp with that I got from Lavinia Stamps that's got a lovely bunch of magical stars on it, and I'm using that just to go around the edges of my tags to indicate that this is a magical page. I like those little stars so much that I decided to add some of them around the Tinkerbell figure and around the frame. This is another case of trusting your eyes. Something wasn't quite right to me, and I think it was that the stars around the frame were just a little bit too dark. So again, back in with the gesso, and you could probably quite easily do this with a very light coat of acrylic paint, but I'm using the gesso and just knocking those stars back a little bit around that frame area. A couple of white highlights for Tinkerbell's eyes, and there's something missing, and you know what it is. It's got to be a little bit of sparkle. This is a magical page and it needs a little bit of fairy dust, so I'm going to get out a couple of shades of stickles, one which is one of the Stardust stickles, then I'm using one that's got a slight tinge of green and one that's got a slight tinge of blue, and I'm just randomly dropping little tiny dots of sparkle all the way around my frame, concentrating on the stars, and then all the way around the very edges of my tags. Obviously I'm going to have to take these out while I do this and let them dry before I try to put them back into my book. That's it, page 3 complete. All my stickles are dry and I can add my photographs and journaling. So I've got room on the backs of my tags, and I've also got room around the image of Tinkerbell should I want to add journaling there. So I'll do that a bit later on. So until next time, I'm going to get my thinking cap on to see what page 4 will bring, and I'm going to see if I can think of other new ways to add pieces of journaling into these fun interactive pages. If you like my video, don't forget to hit subscribe, and I'd love to have you join me on this creative journey. Also, don't forget to hit the thumbs up if you like the video, and the share button to share the creativity, and don't forget to stay tuned to the end of the video for more links to more pages. Until next time, thank you for watching.